Hello and welcome to the Power of Podcasting, the podcast that's designed to help you spread your message, advice, and stories in order to maximize both your impact and your income. I'm your host, Nick Palkowski, and now it's time to learn about the power of podcasting. Social media. We know it's a great tool for spreading your message and growing your business, but it can also take up so much time and be so difficult. It requires hours sometimes to actually stay on top of just social media posting. There are people whose that's their entire career. How are you actually supposed to run a business and manage a social media platform? Well, the key is automation. And today's guest, Roeder, is going to talk all about how you can use social media automation to grow your audience and, more importantly, save you time. So we're going to be talking about her because she is actually the CEO of a phenomenal social media tool. Laura is the founder of Edgar. And Laura began her entrepreneurial journey at the age of 22 when she quit a design job and decided to launch her first business. Since then, she has founded B School with Marie Forleo and has run successful courses of her own, as well as even being named to the top 100 entrepreneurs in America under 30 years of age. And Edgar, which is a great social media scheduling tool, was created out of a need that Laura had in her very own business to effectively manage social media. So Laura actually pivoted her business to go from managing and consulting on social media into a business that is focused on software as a service. And we're going to talk to her today about how you can actually, as a content creator, use a tool like Edgar to really automate and repurpose some of that content. So let's dive on into this interview with Laura. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you, Nick. I'm happy to be here.
And now I'm really excited to talk to you because you're actually helped create one of the software tools that we use all the time for our clients. And you have a lot of knowledge in terms of social media and how entrepreneurs, how business people can actually grow their brand through social media. But I really want to get started with, how did you actually become an entrepreneur? What was your kind of journey into working for yourself?
So I started my entrepreneurial journey very young, and it's kind of all I've ever done. I've had one real job for about a year and a half, and then I started working for myself when I was about 22 and haven't looked back since. So I was working as a graphic designer at an ad agency in Chicago, and I had a lot of the typical frustrations that people have when they want to quit their job and strike out on their own, not having any freedom, being bored at work. But the biggest one for me was that I didn't really want to be just a designer. If you love design, it's a great job, but it's also a very limiting job because that's all you do. And I was more interested in the client side and the larger product strategy and marketing strategy and things like that. And I kind of looked at my career path within an agency, and I saw that it was really going to take me about 10 years before I was in a high enough position to be involved with the client strategy. So I kind of thought, well, I clearly don't have that kind of patience to wait 10 years before I can do what I want to do. So if I just quit and I work for myself, then I'll certainly have plenty of interaction with clients. I'll be running the business. I'll be doing everything. So that's what I did.
Yeah, it seems that lack of patience is kind of a common thread between a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, I don't want to wait this long. Let's just start our own.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, entrepreneurship is a great shortcut to so many things. Actually, it applies in so many areas. I was just talking to my friend yesterday, and she told me that her brother sold a TV show. I'm here in LA, so I know, a certain amount of people kind of involved in that industry. And she told me he sold a show and he gets to run the writer's room. And I didn't really know what that meant. So I'm like, is that a big deal? And she's like, yes, this is something people spend, 20 years in TV writing wanting to run the writer's room. And he's never even been a professional writer before, but because he sold the script, now he gets to do that. And I thought it was such a cool story. There's entrepreneurial shortcuts in every part of the world, every industry.
Oh, that's awesome. So what are maybe a few of the entrepreneur shortcuts that you kind of took here to get really to where you are today with Edgar?
Yeah, so with Edgar, we've had really, really phenomenal growth. We got to our first $1 million in annual recurring revenue about 11 months after launch, which was a lot faster than we expected, which was really a really cool accomplishment. And when you're running a business, I think one of the biggest shortcuts is hire talented people as quickly as you
Yeah.
can. And I think when you're starting out, this can sound really intimidating because you're thinking, well, I don't have $100,000 a year and benefits and stuff. And it doesn't have to mean a full W-2 salary, right? You can hire freelancers, you can hire people for one-off projects here and there, but getting into that habit of not doing everything yourself is how you really scale out your business to the next level.
Oh, I completely agree with that. And it's kind of a frightening thing. I'm kind of going through that
Mhm.
process right now. We just hired a project manager probably a month ago now at this point, and it's been kind of crazy to see in a year and a half to grow the team from, just me working on client projects to
Mhm.
now actually having a team of 5 of us sitting there and working on client projects.
Wow.
It's been there's challenges with actually running and actually doing the day-to-day work, but I'm finding that there's almost even more challenges with managing that group of people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a whole new set of problems. And I think
Yes.
that's something that is, I know I have a love-hate relationship with as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. I think we have this fantasy that, like, one of these days I'm going to get it all figured out. The business is going to be running and it's going to be great and I'm just going to be done. But there's always a new problem. There's always something new to learn. And that's also what's really fun because you're constantly getting to learn and explore about new areas.
Yeah. So have you found any strategies that work really well for you in terms of actually managing a team of people?
I think it's all about giving ownership. I think that's the number one concept that is so, so important when you're working with other people. So many people delegate instead of really giving ownership, meaning, okay, I have this task and I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. And then you do it exactly how I do it. And then you check back in with me and I approve it. And there's a detail that you did a little differently than I would have done. So I have you redo it or I'm going to redo it myself. That doesn't save you any time at all. And it's also really disempowering for the person doing the work. I mean, I remember being in that position when I was a designer. My boss would redo all my work. And to be fair, I was new and I wasn't that talented, right? She was a better designer than me, but it was incredibly frustrating, and it did give me sort of a bad attitude about like, well, why am I really going to bother doing my best because she's just going to redo it, and that's a really easy trap to fall into as opposed to, okay, this is yours, you own it, you make the decisions on it. That attitude is how you get really, really excellent work out of the people that you work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to kind of almost switch gears a little bit here and talk specifically about Edgar. What was it that it actually drew you to create Edgar?
Yeah, so Edgar is one of those products that was definitely born out of my own frustrations with the existing social media tools. So I've been in the social media marketing space for a very long time, doing consulting and online training. So obviously, I've been a heavy social media marketer myself and promoting my own companies. And Edgar actually came directly from a training program we have called Social Brilliant. And in Social Brilliant, before Edgar, we were teaching people our social media strategy and plan, which involves this really, really cumbersome giant spreadsheet. Where what we would do and what we would teach people is create this big spreadsheet with all your social media updates and create different columns with all the categories, load all your updates into the spreadsheet, and then you have to go update by update and copy and paste those updates into your social media scheduler, mark off the ones that you've used, and then cycle through the updates top to bottom. So it's great for kind of vetting your content and repeating your content, creating a content library that you can continue to leverage. But the amount of busy work and admin work
Yeah.
was kind of insane. And
Yeah,
I know
those
there's
spreadsheets sound way too familiar, that's for
yeah.
sure.
Yep. I know there's like a lot of people listening that are still using one of these spreadsheets, and obviously they don't work for images. There's a lot of problems, and I mean, the short version is that Edgar really does everything that we were doing manually from those spreadsheets. But just to focus on one problem, it was so crazy to me that none of the tools have a library of all your updates. That seems so, I just always thought, why am I keeping my social media updates in a Google spreadsheet and not my social media tool. It's like if WordPress didn't store your blog posts, right? If they were like, we'll send them out, but we're not keeping them. That's kind of what the tools do. So, I mean, that Edgar does a lot more than that, but that alone is kind of one of the big frustrations that I think started me down this path of like, let's just create a social media tool that just holds on to my social media updates.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like I said, I love Edgar. It's so great not to have to deal with those spreadsheets or constantly re-enter status posts and things like that. It just makes it so simple, especially when you're managing multiple clients. So it's a phenomenal tool for anybody who is specifically a social media manager.
Yeah, and the way I think of Edgar is you just know that you have your bread and butter content going out every day without having to do anything. You never have to refill your queue. You never have to manually schedule an update. And you can always do more besides that. Edgar really focuses on that evergreen content that can go out over and over again. So you might have some other updates that you're sticking in on top of it, but you just don't have that social media panic every morning. Right. You're like, what am I going to put on social media today?
So for people who may not be used to this, why is it so important to actually repurpose or repost some of those same updates again and again? Because that's essentially what Edgar allows you to do. Right. But why is that so important?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it really scares a lot of people. A lot of people ask me, are you allowed to do that? Will my audience be angry if I do that? And yes, you're allowed to. And no, they won't be angry. And the best way to think of it, if you've ever used Twitter, you know what it's like. It's kind of like a parade, right? You're standing by the parade, it's passing by. You see the bits that pass you by while you're there, right? When it's in the middle, you don't see the beginning, you don't see the end, you only see the one little bit and then you go home. And Twitter, you sign on to Twitter, you see what passes you by during those 5 minutes, and then you sign off. So if someone didn't send a tweet within that exact same 5-minute window, then you guys missed each other. And I mean, the stats show this. The stats show it's about 4% of your audience on Facebook lately sees any given post, closer to maybe 8 to 10% on Twitter. Obviously, the numbers vary a lot, but across the board, 90% of the people who follow you are not seeing any given status update. So to create so much work for yourself that you're going to create, 1 to 10 brand new pieces of content every single day for the rest of time, no one has time for it, one. And two, it really doesn't make sense because if you want a larger portion of your audience to see the update, you need to send it out more than once. And I just want to reassure people, one, that you'll get the same reaction, which always kind of surprises people when they start using Edgar. You'll post something, post it. It's really, really short, actually. Post it even a week later. Most people leave longer than that, a month or two. But if you even post it a week later, you will usually find it'll get the same amount of shares, same amount of retweets. Sometimes it's actually kind of weird. It gets the exact same amount. And people don't care if they have seen it before. It usually doesn't happen, but if they have seen it before, it's like, oh, I think I saw that. It's not, that's kind of, maybe they didn't click on it before and they did now, or maybe they're like, oh yeah, that was a good article. I remember that one. I mean, that's sort of as strong as the reaction gets.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed just on my personal account is that I've seen some of the same people like and share the exact same post multiple times. like I know you liked that one last time. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. And I know one way I also explain it to clients a lot is that you are continuing to grow your audience. You have a bigger audience at episode 75 than you did at episode 5. And episode 5 is still relevant to those new people who are just coming and seeing you for the very first time at episode 75. So it's time to show that to them again. Exactly. It's time to reach back out, let them know it's there because that content is still phenomenal. They just haven't been exposed to it yet.
Exactly. And I love looking at the traffic patterns of sites that use Edgar, because normally when you post a new podcast or a new blog post, we all know how it looks. It has that huge spike the first day, a little bit of traffic the first week, and then it's usually dead after that forever. And, the tiny, tiny trickle of traffic. And when you put a post into Edgar and Edgar's sending it out over and over again, that older podcast, your charts look totally different because you get the spike every time Edgar sends it out. We had a post recently that got more traffic later than it did the first time, just automatically being sent out by Edgar. I don't even know exactly why. Probably, an influencer happened to share it or pick it up, or it just got traction that time. But that would have been just a completely missed opportunity that Edgar just did automatically.
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool to see that. What are some strategies that you have to really use Edgar effectively? Maybe for someone specifically who has a podcast or some other content producer, how can they use it the most effectively?
So the most important thing is just to get that library of your older podcasts into Edgar. And if you're worried about them not being relevant, like if you have a few that don't, if you did like a special Christmas episode at one point,
Yeah.
and you don't want that to go out later, like that's fine. You don't have to load that one in. But for most people, most of their topics are still interesting later on. Obviously, there's some exceptions, right? If you're talking about the stock market that week and that's your topic, people probably aren't interested in that years later, although they might want to see if your predictions were right. But for most of us, our content is still great. And like you pointed out, you really need to be showing people your old content because that's the whole idea. If you don't have new people coming in every day, well, then your business is dying, right? That's what we all need. We all need new listeners every day, every week. That's the only way for a business to grow. So for sure you're getting new eyeballs that haven't been exposed to all the great content that you've spent so much time creating. So bare minimum, load up your old podcast, have them go out just even once a day. Send a link out to your old podcast. And it's so funny with Edgar customers because almost everyone sees an increase to their traffic. And we get a lot of stories saying, you doubled my traffic from social, you quadrupled my traffic from social. And it's not because we do anything magical. It's because if you send twice as many links, you will drive twice as much traffic. And that sounds so simple, but it's absolutely true. So if you're linking to your back catalog once a day, start linking twice a day, you're going to see twice the number of downloads. I mean, it sounds funny, but that's what we see over and over again.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy. So I know one thing that I've been seeing more and more people do is actually use Edgar to manage groups. So that I think that's really kind of a neat way to use Edgar. So they're posting questions that, or some sort of tip or something that happens every single, Monday, maybe they ask a certain question, or Tuesday they give a specific tip as a way to actually manage a larger group. And I think that's one of the really unique functions that you can do with Edgar, and one of the unique uses I've seen. And I really, really like that.
Yeah, we do it. We have a Facebook user group, and one of the things we do is Free for All Friday, where everyone can just post a link to whatever they want to promote their own business or blog. And so, yeah, that's just scheduled in Edgar every Friday, the Free for All Friday post. And I know Facebook groups are a big strategy for engagement right now, but taking the time to go in there and make sure people are talking and stir the pot, it can be very time consuming. So yeah, Edgar makes sure that all those conversation starters are just in there automatically, or even just stuff like, good morning, what are you up to today? You can have that just going out in the morning every weekday. And then you go in and look at the responses, right? You can't just have a tool just sending messages and then you're never in there doing the engaging. But then with Edgar, you can focus all of your time on that community engagement instead of wasting your time on kind of admin stuff like coming up with status updates and manually posting them.
Yeah, and I think that's a phenomenal point, and something that really needs to be driven home is that Edgar and tools like it are a way to automate the start of a conversation, automate a certain point of it. But really the gold is what happens when you interact with people, when you start going that next level deep and driving the conversations even more. This is just a tool to help get the ball rolling.
Exactly. And we've really seen that to be true with the results that people get. People who think that Edgar is just going to, solve social media and they never have to log in again. I haven't seen that work. I haven't seen someone just set up Edgar, never log into Twitter and then just be like, everything's great. Because these channels are meant to be social channels, right? They're great for relationship building and forming a bond with your audience and checking out what your audience is linking to and looking at and what they're talking about. So I really wouldn't recommend using any tool just to automate everything and never look. Just use that tool to free up your time so that you do have time to have those conversations.
Oh, yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. So how are you actually getting the word out about Edgar right now? Like, what are you doing to actually make sure more people are finding out about this tool and actually using it?
Yeah, so we do content marketing, writing on our blog. We do social media marketing. We do paid acquisition, mostly Facebook ads, and we're getting into AdWords. And I really like to be interviewed on podcasts as well
Nice,
as a
nice.
great way to promote Edgar.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's awesome. Because really, your ideal audience are people who generally produce podcasts or listen to a lot of podcasts. So I think that's a
Yep.
phenomenal way to go about it too.
Yeah, and it's like it's fun and easy for me.
Yeah, I bet. So, do you have any tips for podcast producers, people who are have their own show? That what's some of the ways that they can really be effective when they're bringing a guest on like you? Because, like you said, I do know that you are on a lot of podcasts.
Mhm.
I've heard about you first. I heard about Edgar first through several different podcasts like Smart Passive Income and other places like
Mhm.
that. And I know you've been actually talking to a few of my clients as well. So, what are some maybe best approaches, best practices that a podcaster could do when bringing on a guest?
Yeah, so I think if you're a bit of a newer podcaster and maybe there's some bigger guests that you want to approach, I mean, one, I am always interested in your numbers, even if they're small. It doesn't have to be massive, but the numbers combined with the type of people that you reach. I mean, that's what's very interesting to me. So if you're like, we have an audience of 3,000 and our core audience is small business owners, right? These are people in the trenches every day. I mean, that's me, right? That's
Hmm.
who Edgar is perfect for. Or we're great for people who do podcasts because anyone who creates content is a real home run for Edgar. So combining some basic stats with exactly who you target, and that's always very appealing to me if someone is very clear on exactly who they're talking to, because I just think their podcast is going to do better. And then I'm able to provide better content as well, knowing, okay, everyone listening to this is running a podcast. So I can tailor my information for them. And make it personal. You know, there's definitely podcasts that have been starting out and really teeny tiny, but they just write a really nice appeal that makes me want to be like, this guy's cool. I want to talk to him, and maybe we can help each other out a bit by me being on the podcast. So I mean, I think just anything in life, right? It's all about relationships. And instead of sending someone a sort of formal, generic post, uh, email rather, sending them some kind of like, I've heard you on podcasts, and I just think my audience would be so excited about you. You know, I loved this one story that you've shared. That would definitely get me interested.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And how about for in terms of actually like the interview process? Have you found something that works really well, that appeals to you more that way, or things that people do that kind of really mess up the whole interview for you?
That's a great question. The worst is following a script.
Mm.
So sometimes I do a podcast and they have all their questions planned out, and they literally just don't even listen to my response. You know, they'll just be like, "Great, thanks," and then they kind of read out the next question, and it just doesn't make for a very compelling interview. Or sometimes you can tell that they're like distracted and doing something else. I'm like, "Hello, this is like we both put aside some time for this. Let's both like
Yeah.
show up and do it right." Um, so yeah, just a more natural format. I mean, that's obviously really basic. I know everyone listening to this already knows this, but a more natural format where you're listening to the person you're interviewing, bouncing off what they're saying. It's much more enjoyable for me.
No, I think that's a good thing to bring up though, because yes, it is a little bit more basic and it seems like everyone should know that, but I think so often we can sometimes forget that. And,
Right?
get so, especially if you're nervous, if you're new to
Mm,
podcasting, if this is one of the first interviews, like you're going to want to try and follow a script more, or if you've done so many, you might, and are busy all the time, you might feel like, hey, I can just phone it in on this one. But
right.
no, it's not going to be nearly as good. So I think that's a phenomenal point right there. So what is maybe a really great strategy for one of our listeners here who really wants to start using social media more effective to promote their content? Do you have one specific action item that they could actually go about doing to be more effective?
Mm, yeah, thinking about podcasts specifically, I think show notes are incredibly important for sharing on social because the difficult thing about podcasts is that you can't skim them, right? You have
Right.
to make time to sit down and listen to the whole thing. And it makes it a lot more difficult for people to share it on social, which, obviously is really important for getting more traffic and social media followers if other people are sharing your content. It's a pretty big ask to say, listen to the entire 30 minutes and then share. But what a lot of the data has revealed about social media sharing is that people absolutely share a lot of things that they haven't actually read or listened to. And actually, they found there's sort of like certain angles that are better for sharing and not reading, and certain things that'll get read but not shared. But you need to give people some sort of tidbit that will make them share it, even if they haven't listened. So if the headline is just interview with Laura Roeder, no one's really going to share that. There's
Right.
nothing really interesting or compelling. But if you have a really juicy headline, if it's like this guest revealed her three secrets to, getting this result faster than anyone I've ever heard of, people might go ahead and share that on social, even if they haven't listened to it. They're like, oh, I'm going to listen to this one later, and this sounds awesome. And also just having those little bullet points of some of the most interesting things from the conversation can really go far.
No, that's a great strategy. And I know one thing we've been doing is really focusing on that image that goes along with the
Hmm.
along with the show notes, is actually making that very appealing image, but also having the URL in the image that drives directly to the podcast show notes, as a way to hopefully, in case it gets spread even further, they'll still
Hmm.
be able to find their way back to the actual audio content.
Yeah, I mean, images are definitely really important on social, especially something like if you look at Twitter, most of the tweets still don't contain images, so the ones that do just pop out like
Mm.
crazy. So we've absolutely seen with our customers and our own social media updates that images get shared and clicked on a lot more. And then with platforms like Instagram, where you can't put links, or like you said, when something's in the web, it's just kind of wild out there. I do think it's a great idea to add that URL in.
And do you have any tips for creating great images that are going to be shared more?
Um, I mean, I would just say to make them the more unique, the better, right? So I think with podcasts, see, now I'm afraid of what I don't know what kind of images you create, so I'm
Oh,
like,
you're
I don't want to,
you're
I don't
good. If
want to
you're
say the
critiquing
wrong
our,
thing.
that's all right. We need to change then if it's wrong. So go
Well,
ahead, dive on in.
I don't have any data on what's right or wrong. I just have noticed as a podcast listener, there's this sort of like illustration style that a lot of people
Yes.
use where they have very similar looking illustrations. Which I guess works to signify like this is a podcast because it makes me think that when I see that style of illustration, but maybe doesn't work so well for really standing out in the crowd because I've seen it a lot before. So I would just say, I mean, I think it's always a matter of like, don't be worried about what everyone else is doing and just do what you think is cool. Like I did a presentation recently where I just found the most god awful stock image that I could possibly find. The most like cheesy, horrible, for like teamwork and stuff like that. So, if you did that for your podcast, that actually might be a more interesting strategy because those would kind of stand out because no one else wants to use them. So I think just making your visual style a little more unique so that when people are scrolling through, it's not like just another podcast illustration like I've seen a million times.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. And I guess one thing I really want to ask you about is, what is really your approach to kind of business? It seems like you, along that same kind of tone of doing something just kind of unique, something very different than other people, you seem to have that kind of flair in business. And I'm wondering if that's something you're very strategic about, or if that's just kind of the way you are, is you like to go against the grain a little bit. What's kind of
Hmm.
your general business approach?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I am strategic about standing out from competitors. With Edgar, we've had so much fun with the brand because our company name is a person's name, we always call Edgar he instead of it. It's amazing to me in our reviews that everyone has latched onto this. Everyone calls Edgar he, and so many of our reviews are like, "I met this guy named Edgar, and you're gonna want to meet him too." Or so many customers started writing in their reviews and tweets and stuff, "Edgar is my boyfriend," that we made "Edgar is my boyfriend" stickers and sent them out. And it was totally created by our community. So it's part of it is one, just having fun with business, because like, why are we self-employed, right? We do this to have the freedom, to have the fun. Like, why not put in some elements that make your everyday work a little more enjoyable? And the other thing that I do consciously is I do think it's important to consciously do things a little bit different from people in your industry, because what everyone does is they start a business, they don't know what they're doing. So they look around and they see what everyone else does. They're like, okay, I'm going to start my own law firm. So I'm going to look at other law firms and I'm going to see what they're named. Like, why do all law firms have two last names as the name? That's not a law. You have to name your law firm that way, right? Why do they all have websites that look exactly the same? Why does every attorney's headshot have them in like the same suit making the same face? It's just everyone looks around and that's what everyone else is doing. And everyone is terrified to do something different. But if you have a law firm with a different name, with a different looking website, where your photo is you like making a dumb face on vacation instead of, in your corporate suit, people are going to resonate with that. Not everyone. Some people are going to be like, this guy, I need my lawyer to wear a suit. But a lot of people are going to be like, thank God, finally a lawyer. It doesn't feel like they have to wear a suit every time we meet, because I wear my sweatpants as an entrepreneur and I'm feeling ridiculous, So anything that you can do to look different from your industry is going to be a good thing for your business.
Yeah, well, and I think that's also a great point of just, you don't want to necessarily appeal to everyone. You want to find your core group. We just had Jeff Goins on the podcast where he did talk about getting your 1,000 true fans, getting that tribe of people. And that's really what you want to go for, and not worry about trying to please everyone and, have that bland, vanilla, lawyer-looking website.
Right. Some people might think that Edgar is too silly. They might think I'm trusting this tool with my social media. I'm not like these guys. These guys aren't serious enough for me. And that's fine. Like, those people sound like they'd probably be sort of a pain to have as customers, to be honest. So yeah, you're going to lose some people, but you'd actually be surprised. I think, we're all human, right? But then we get into business and then we have this idea that things are supposed to be really dull and really formal, but no one really likes it. It's the weird part to me. It's like this stupid system we're all participating in that no one's into. And you see someone who's authentic and you just are like, oh, thank you, finally. But this is what we all want. And I think for me, the fact that I never knew what to do, that I started my business so young and I never had any training otherwise. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. It just didn't occur to me to do a lot of these kind of stuffy old school business things. I'm like, well, I'm a 23-year-old, so I'm going to run my business like I'm a 23-year-old when I was getting started. And I think, I've been really blessed by what I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I just want to thank you. This has been a phenomenal interview. And I was just wondering if, for our last question, if you have any final bit of advice for someone who is just diving into really the content marketing world, just getting started. Maybe they have their podcast, don't have their podcast just yet, but they're really wanting to spread a message out into the world. What would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
My biggest piece of advice is don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just get it out there. It's so easy to delay for weeks and months and years and say, I have this idea and I'm still learning and I'm still researching, or I'm waiting until I have enough time to really pursue it. I mean, the amazing thing about the internet is that there's no startup, there's no overhead. You can, even if you have your own blog, right, go to Medium and write a post about what you're passionate about and share it with other authors on Medium, email it to a few people, see what people think. Just getting your idea out into the world is so much more important than getting everything perfectly set up before you launch.
just go take action. That's really what it's about. I love that. Well, Laura, thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal interview. Where's the best place for our listeners to actually find out more about you specifically?
Yeah, so you can find my Twitter at LKR.
Awesome. We'll be sure to link that up in the show notes as well. And of course, head on over to Meet Edgar. I think that's a tool that every one of our listeners needs to check out and consider using, because I just love it. We use it all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks again. It's been a phenomenal getting a chance to actually talk to you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I definitely want to recommend that you go head on over to meetedgar.com and check out that tool. I use it with all my clients. Really love it. It's a big help in terms of managing the social media schedules and making sure that content doesn't die. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see so many content producers encounter, is that they produce a great piece of content, but then they maybe announce it to the world once and it fades away to be gone and never to be seen again. Don't let your content die like that. It's worth more than just that flash in the pan, quick views that it gets from the initial release. Bring it back around. Let more people find out about the great pieces of information that you have to share and really dive into that content that you're creating. So check out meetedgar.com. I also want to highly recommend that you head on over to thepowerofpodcasting.tv, where you can find all the show notes for all our episodes, subscribe to the podcast, and even find a few other resources there as well. So until next week, it's time for you to go out there and maximize both your impact and your income.
If you're looking to grow your business using podcasting, but don't have the time to edit the audio, insert the intro and outro, write up the show notes, post the episode to all the different sites, and do all of the ridiculous back-end work that's required, then you need yourpodcastguru.com, where you bring the content and we take care of the rest. We'll even co-host the show for you. Visit yourpodcastguru.com right now to explode your audience and crush it in the podcasting world.